Welcome everybody to the Get Unhooked for Families weekly coaching call. I'm Jason Coombs, for those of you that are joining us for the first time, and for those of you that are watching this on the recording or just listening to audio, welcome. The hope and objective of this coaching call is to give extra support to those that are seeking it. And we follow the guide of the book, Unhooked, which is right behind my head there. And Unhooked is my experience, my family's experience, but not just a memoir. I didn't want to just write a memoir. I wanted to make sure that it had some teeth to it and some evidence-based practices, because opinions are like toothbrushes. Everybody's got one and nobody wants to use anyone else's. And so I've learned when you Google search how to help an addict or an alcoholic, gal, you can get lost in those weeds pretty dang quick. And that's what happened to my parents when they were searching for help. And so I wanted to take readers and listeners straight to the top of the learning curve, and not just offer opinion, but actually couch my experience in evidence-based practices that we use at Discuss Recovery, but also that therapists and influencers use throughout the world. And we've talked a little bit about some of those principles over the last few weeks. We've gotten into we've skimmed through motivational interviewing. By the way, there are courses that you can look up and take actual, like, 2 day. There's a beginner course that's 2 days long, and then there's a third day that's for advanced, and you can really get a lot of meat out of those courses. And if you want a trainer that I prefer, his name is Craig Anderson, and if you just Google search, or I could even provide the resource, but Craig Anderson, MINT means Motivational Interviewing National Trainers, I believe. You have to be certified. And anyway, I've taken quite a few of his courses with my staff, and I can't get enough, because he is just so powerful and entertaining. And for someone like me that has ADHD and a lot going on all the time in my mind, I really struggle sitting through a conference or a coaching call or a workshop for a couple hours, let alone 3 days, 3 days. But he keeps me engaged the entire time. Sometimes I have to stand up and go to the back of the room. Sometimes, I have to take a call or two, but he's so entertaining. And the last time he did one was online. And so you could do a virtual course, but he also does some in Eastern Idaho, and he does some in my side of the state over in the Boise area, and then does virtual. So check him out. He's a friend of mine too. He's awesome. So he'll take you to the top of the learning curve if you really want to dive into the principles of motivational interviewing. And what is motivational interviewing? As it says in the book, it is a spirit and approach to draw out internal motivation in someone else. It is very much the way God works with me, I have learned, to help motivate me. And it's an environment of non-judgment and unconditional love. And so I have learned that skill set or approach, not only is it evidence-based and therapeutically sound, it is helping me in all of my relationships with my spouse and my children, with my coworkers, with difficult coworkers, and It's awesome. It's awesome. And I use it on you guys too. So it's cool. It's changed a lot for my life. So let's jump right on in. All right. We're going to start with today. I'm going to just jump over to, give me one sec. I'm not as prepared as I thought I would be because the police showed up at my house this morning. I kid you not, because my phone accidentally did that emergency alert when I was on my bike. And so that was fun to have a surprise visit. I started to panic and hide in my closet for a little bit when my wife got the door. And then I was like, Jason, you're okay. You can face these guys. You've done nothing wrong this time. Okay, here we go. I'm going to jump over to the book. If you have your book, we are going to, can you guys see that? Hopefully you can. I'm going to pull it over to my bigger screen here. I am looking at Linda. Linda, can you see develop discrepancy? Just give me a thumbs up or a thumbs down since you're on mute. Thumbs down. Okay, let's try that again.
We saw it for a minute, Jason, and then when you zoomed, it changed. When you went to the other screen, I think. There you go.
About that. We good?
Yeah, what page is that?
Okay, so we are, well, according to the PDF, it's on page 149. I think this is the latest version. But develop discrepancy. It's right after, I believe, rolling with resistance. Let me just scroll up. Look away if you get motion sick. All right. Yeah, rolling with resistance. I like to say dance rather than wrestle when you roll with resistance. Super important to dance rather than wrestle. Anytime you try to break a horse in, it's going to take longer. And for those of you that haven't seen the horse video, that one, we'll revisit that one in the coming weeks. But it's all about eliminating conflict and locking horns. And it's much more about suggestions and invitations rather than saying you should or you must. All right, so here we are at developing discrepancy. And I would like, Doug, if you can see it, would you mind reading this section?
Sure. Motivation increases when an addicted person becomes aware of the discrepancy between where he is and where he wants to be. When an individual sincerely internalizes the severity of his addiction and how much it is interfering with his true core values and future goals, he is more likely to experience an increased motivation to prepare for change. Taking an honest inventory of our life domains and where we are off balance is a great way to develop discrepancy. This process will naturally facilitate a deeper admission of his problem, leading him to seek a resolution or solution by which he can achieve his goals of becoming a better version of himself. This may sound kind of demotivating to show them how far they are from where they want to be, but it's an important principle in evoking internal motivation. This is where I get the most excited in helping people recover. Without a vision of recovery and a clear pathway to get there, there's no hope and progress will be dormant. I love the perspective of American inspirational speaker, Jan, how do you say it? Jan Van Zandt. Yeah. If you don't have a vision, you're going to be stuck in what you know. And the only thing you know is what you've already seen. Addicted people genuinely lack the vision of a brighter future, free from the chains of alcohol and drugs, and how to obtain it. In fact, the idea of long-term sobriety can actually sound miserable. It is helpful to invite them to experiment with recovery anyway. Developing a discrepancy between where they are and where they want to end up will inspire their desire to take action. Action is the only way people ultimately achieve long-term recovery. Without a vision, there can be no hope, and hope is a fuel for action. How does hope work? I like to think of hope as a way of thinking or a cognitive process. Emotions play a supporting role, but hope is really a thought process made up of what C.R. Snyder calls a trilogy of goals, pathways, and agency. C.R. Snyder, former researcher at the University of Kansas, enlightened the meaning of hope for me. He taught me that in very simple terms, hope happens when we set goals to reach our desired outcome. We see the path ahead, including the action steps. We believe our abilities, self-efficacy to persevere with tenacity until we reach our goal. Consider helping your addicted loved ones create a list of action steps that will help them achieve their goals. Then focus only on those initial actions first. Resume this process throughout their journey. I'm going to keep going, or?
Nope. Thank you, Doug.
Yep.
Any insights from reading that section?
Well, it's right about where we are right now with Tyler. And since last week, or the last time we were on, he was in a great, what we thought was a great sober house situation up in the Seattle area. And about 2 weeks or less in, he decided to relapse. And the deal there is if you use, you're out then, not in an hour, not the next day, you're out then. So he came back, and he came back, got the house and got his stuff and left. We had a hunch something was going on because he got quiet and there wasn't texting back. And anyway, so we've had a lot of time to worry and think about that and talk about it. And then today I had an opportunity to, so there were a couple of texts, but we didn't really know what was going on, and they weren't making us feel any better. So today, this morning, he called me, and I had an opportunity to, even though I wasn't fully up to speed on this, I had an opportunity to practice that. And I felt really good about it. I think it was a good thing for him. I got to talk to Connie's back at work now, or back on site, and I'm still at home. And we talked about it briefly a little while ago, and it felt like a really good opportunity for both Tyler, mostly for Tyler, but for us to change the way we've been doing things. So anyway, so it kind of takes into this, these last few pages that we've been discussing.
Hey, thank you for sharing that. I think that this particular section is, I want you guys to know that this is definitely something that is a practice, and all of these principles are. But as the last subsection of the motivational interviewing topics, and just as a reminder of what those are, we started with collaboration, not confrontation. We talked about evoking or drawing out ideas versus imposing ideas. We talked about individuality versus authority, and really honoring their individuality, and work on our approach to not be the authority of their lives, even when we know we have a better idea for their lives than they do, or at least we think we do. Supporting self-efficacy, which is their competence and in their abilities to actually succeed in sobriety, which typically is depleted almost entirely when they're trying to get sober, especially when we experience a series of failures, like Doug, you just described. Um, when the past shows you that you are consistently going to fail and let people down and let yourself down, it's hard to believe that you can actually change. And so the hope is almost absent. And so this particular approach is going to come along the way after you have some of those other pieces in place. And that rapport and that trust is in operation. Without the rapport and without the trust, it's super difficult to sit down and talk about their vision of recovery. And as I said in here, this is where I get the most excited to help people recover. Right here, you guys, this applies to you as well. I love thinking of hope as a cognitive process. This kind of takes out all that subjectivity and it simplifies hope in a 3-part trilogy, as C.R. Snyder describes. And when you look at goals for your life, let's switch off our addicted loved ones for now and think about hope for your addicted loved one and your addicted loved one's recovery. So as we know, we have limitations on what we can do in terms of their desired outcome. But as we shift, and I love what Shauna shared the other day. Shauna, shout out to you. What you shared the other day was so inspiring of how you talked about shifting focus to your personal development. And you talked about, exercise. You talked about different way that you were fueling your body with protein shakes. And that self-care just lit me up. My spirit soars like an eagle when I hear that level of progress, because that is exactly the point of all of this work. Because as we set goals to reach our desired outcome, what's our desired outcome for our lives? And I want to get into the steps of surrender probably in the next few months on these calls, because as we break down the steps to surrender, it really helps as we make friends with the worst case scenarios, so that we can get clear on what our desired outcome is, even in the event our addicted loved one stays sick for the next 50 years and chooses to live homeless on the streets of Portland or on the streets of Salt Lake. And so what's our desired outcome in that event? And what I hope is your desired outcome is it's similar to my parents' desired outcome, where they can experience their retirement with peace and joy and faith that God has their son in his care. And whatever happens in this life will be his journey that will hopefully refine his spiritual path. And I don't know what you guys believe, but I believe in a afterlife where much will be reconciled, and people with mental illness and substance use disorder and other illnesses will have a lot of grace in the eyes of God. And I think that's really important to focus on. And so as we set goals to reach our desired outcome as the first step to hope, then we see the path ahead, including the action steps, which is essentially what Unhooked is it's kind of illuminating a distance of areas that you can work on within yourself, and not just give you some story of the Coombs who, had a positive outcome, but actually give you meat, give you the tools that you can apply, and point you to resources that you can take action on one day at a time. That will, as you take the action, that will help build your self-efficacy to accomplish the things that you want to accomplish to reach your desired outcome and your goal, which is self-efficacy. And a lot of motivational speeches think that they can just gift you self-efficacy with 10 minutes of a hit, watching a YouTube video or listening to an hour motivational speech. But in my experience, unless it's backed up by true building of self-efficacy, it's going to be a fleeting attempt at longevity with that action, with that change. And so how do we build our own self-efficacy and support our own self-efficacy in reaching our goals in our life domains? Like, this all goes back to the life domains. Where are you deficient in the life domains? And I want to take you through this process yourselves. And then over the next 7 days until we meet again, I kind of want to get a pulse on those of you that actually do this, that take my suggestion. And you're not just here for an hour, to get a little hit and then go back to doing the same things tomorrow. But if you're willing to take my suggestion and try 7 days of a new action, I'd love to hear the feedback and the results of those that do it, and what happens to hope, because this is how hope works. This is how hope works. Think about that. It's not just a choice to, oh, today I have hope, tomorrow I don't. Today I'm depressed, tomorrow I'm excited. Today he's choosing to contact me and he's telling me all the right things, so therefore I have hope. I haven't heard from him in a week, now I don't have hope. That is not hope. That is codependency riding the roller coaster of someone's outcomes and putting all of your emotional sobriety in the actions of others. You can have hope even if you don't hear from him for a month. I promise, because this is how hope works. Hope works when we go through this 3-step process ourselves. So how do we do this? How we do this is wait for it. I pointed you guys to brickhouserecovery.com/unhooked in the book many times. And if you haven't visited this page, there are a few things that I want to point out. Number one is there's a family course available for anyone that wants to go deeper. There is a Get Unhooked workbook that I'm working on that will actually help you go through these action steps along with reading the book. There's a companion book coming that I'm working on, and that will be one that you can gift your addicted loved one. Because it's one thing to give my clients Unhooked, And as they read it, like they get insights, but all the advice is for you. And so I have a whole set of suggestions that I have for them of what I did in early sobriety and how I coped with daily anxiety and how I coped with immoral thoughts and lust and wanting to marry the first woman that showed interest in me. You know, all those things that we go through. But I also want to point you to a few tools. And this first one, Lift, at joinlift.com/unhooked. This is a app on your phone that you can actually track and do inventory, and it's free. You can get the premium if you want, that shows you more analytics. But this is your way of doing a daily tracker for your depression and anxiety. And when I say depression and anxiety, I'm not diagnosing you, but I can tell you that 98% of the family members that I have worked with, when I ask them if they've experienced symptoms of anxiety and depression over the last 5 years of their experience with their addicted loved one, well, 100% of the people I've worked with have said yes. There may have been one or two that were in denial about it, but this is one way where you can begin this process of tracking how you're doing. And the idea is that you become familiar with what are the patterns that are blocking you off from reaching your goals. Daily inventory is not just a practice in recovery, it's a practice that's ancient. And I like to use the metaphor of looking at our garden and identifying the weeds so that we can work a step 6 and 7 on them, which is to become willing to have God remove those defects of character, and then we ask him to. And then with God's help, those weeds get pulled on a daily basis. And what happens then is our flowers and our assets, our gifts have a chance to grow. And those grow simply by clearing out the weeds. And then we cultivate those flowers within ourselves, and we start to recognize we have some things to offer. We've got something to offer the world. And that is the process of how we become more influential in the lives of others. And so I recommend you check out Lift. There's also curriculum in there. There's 45 training discussions that you can listen to. There's guided meditations, there's deep dives, there's success stories, there's additional resources, there's expert webinars you can watch. There's a community in there if you're into, leaning on others and asking them questions of how they do it, or just reading what they have to share. There's risk factor inventories. There's whole set of stuff. Now, Turn is more for your addicted loved one if they're interested in starting to track their progress. And so 100% of my clients use Turn on their phone, and they track daily. We invite them to track daily, but they're required to do the weekly survey, because there's a weekly survey in there that helps us know how they're doing in all their areas that contribute to a well-balanced life. Because if they can have a well-balanced life and enjoy emotional sobriety, then the chances of them relapsing go down significantly, because there's no need to use when you're emotionally sober. And then Fortify is for sexual compulsivity. This is for people struggling with pornography. Very, very powerful. I think there are over 2 million people in this community around the world. This was the flagship app that Impact Collective released. It used to be under the Fight the New Drug nonprofit, if you've heard of that. And Fight the New Drug is such a powerful movement. In fact, Clay Olson, the CEO and founder of Fight the New Drug and the developer of these apps, including Recovery Suite, which I'll talk about. He's actually on his way up here right now, and he's staying at my house for the next few days because we have a workshop that we're doing on Saturday, and he's one of the keynote speakers, as well as I am. And you're all invited if you're in the Treasure Valley area. And there will be some that will be broadcast that I can always get you the links if you message me. And Clay's will be broadcast and recorded. So you should be able to hear his presentation about sexual compulsivity and how it affects the brain from a scientific standpoint with all the research they've done, how it affects the heart and relationships. Porn kills love is sort of their slogan. And then how it affects the world and how it fuels and funds the sex trafficking trade. And that's super powerful. If you want to watch a really powerful documentary or show it to your kids, there is a 3-part series on their website. It's free. Just go to brainheartworld.org. Might be brainheartworld.com. I think it's brainheartworld.org. And there's a 3-part series all about this powerful. In fact, I'm going to play the trailer because I think it's so important. Can you guys see it?
Yep.
What do you think the secret to happiness is?
I think pedicures are the key to happiness.
I think mostly being with my family makes me happy.
I find happiness by being with people.
Brand new.
I was 10 years old when I first saw pornography.
I had to watch at least once, twice a day.
That's where it all just kind of got out of control.
Everything that we do each and every day shapes our brain. So if I watch a lot of porn, I will train my brain regions responsible for porn processing a lot more.
I think my view of love before, I probably even said this on multiple occasions, is love doesn't exist.
Because of porn, we're literally bonding with the screen.
There isn't pornography over here and trafficking over there. They're interlinked.
There have been over 50 studies showing a direct link between pornography and sexual violence.
So the first time he raped me, I noticed that there was a video camera set up in his closet.
Many of the women who are in the production of pornography are actually victims of sex trafficking.
I became the most popular male adult film star of all time. Sex meant nothing to me. I was cold as stone.
Describe love in single words.
I think love is understanding.
Love is patient.
Compassion.
Love, it's complicated and sometimes miserable.
This is gonna be a good day.
I'm much happier without the porn.
To be alive.
I never thought anybody would want me after everything that I have been through.
I found purpose and passion. I love my life now.
After I was rescued, I have become an advocate against pornography, and I'm happy now.
It is possible to experience real love.
Powerful, powerful stuff, you guys. I wanted to just show that to you because my hope is that I arm you with resources that I have discovered to help, because a lot of us that get sober, we have cross addiction, and it's like a whack-a-mole game where you may get sober off drugs and alcohol, but then the other mole pops up, and that might be compulsive overeating like it was for me. It might be sexual compulsivity, risky sexual behaviors and dating, and gambling. I mean, a lot of process addiction, excuse me, nicotine, caffeine. So the idea there is that, you know, we take inventory of that stuff. That's what I'm getting back to. So, and then Recovery Suite, I won't spend a lot of time on. This is what we use at Brick House to all of the data that our clients log in turn rolls up to our outcomes dashboard, so that when we are staffing a client, we can see how is their loneliness. Are they at risk of suicide, suicidal ideation? Are they having thoughts? How's their shame level? How's their mental diet in terms of electronics? How's their sleep? How's their nutrition? So we can see like an all around dashboard of what they're reporting to us. And they know that we're, you know, it's all linked. But when you guys do it, it's not going to be linked to Brick House, so don't worry. You guys will have your privacy. But there are also trainings in here and free videos. But what I want to show you are these graphics from Unhooked. So here you got all of the life domains and so on and so forth. And then there's some family support organizations down below. But when we talk about inventory, like, I think it's important that we not only look at taking inventory of our weeds, but also let's talk about and take inventory of what our character assets are. And so if you take this inventory, you're effectively working a step 10 on a daily basis. And you can do it by just referencing this list, or you can do it by just checking these boxes. One of the things that I like to do is I just reference this list, as well as I reference this list over here, which are the weeds, so to speak, the liabilities, the character defects, the shortcomings that show up in my life every day. And I take a look at these, and then how I do it is I like to write in a journal, and I like to express myself in a letter to God. This is the journal I'm using now. I have bins of these thin little journals, and I usually will fill up one a year. And I'm pretty dang honest in here. And so if someone reads it, they're going to know a lot about me. But I've tempered also what I write. But in the early days, whew, I might want to skim through some of those and see if I really want my children reading those after I'm dead. But that's not the point, to leave a memoir or history for my children. The point is that on a daily basis, I'm connecting with God, and I'm identifying what my liabilities are, and then I ask him to remove them. And so some of the ones that show up, that showed up in the early days of sobriety was this: immoral thinking. I hope that's spelled right. A lot of negative thinking, limiting beliefs, judging others, resentment, definitely impatience, a lot of self-condemnation and self-justification, criticizing for sure. I'm acting as if I used to do all these things. There are still, these still pop up every day. And so what I do, and I put some instructions down here at the end of each day, determine which character defect has been the most threatening to your recovery. And then take the time to write it out in your journal, how this particular situation has affected your sobriety, or in your case, your emotional sobriety, your wellness. And then give the defect to your higher power in a prayer. Ask him to remove them. The idea is that God really is only interested in this is the opinion of and experience of Jason Coombs. This is not anything other than that. But I would say that it parallels with sacred writ, that really the only thing that we can offer God is our will. That is the most precious, and align it with him. And this process is that. And as we ask God to remove these on a daily basis in writing, in a letter, and I do 1 page a day. I try not to go less than that, but sometimes I do. And the reason why I go 1 page is my therapist said early on that it takes about a page to get honest and real and really like connect the heart and the mind and have it flow out your arm. I don't type it because I don't want to get distracted with electronics. That's just me. I like to just be with my journal. I take it on vacations. I take it everywhere except for like work. And this is one way that I stay healthy when I am tempted and peppered with all this stuff that pops up on a daily basis. I want to invite you guys to experiment with this and to try going through the inventory process on a daily, nightly, morning, afternoon. Just do it once a day for 7 days and take an inventory of yourself and recognize those things that are cropping up. And even if you don't do it in a letter to God, if you're not there yet, if that's not your style, just go ahead and take the inventory on the worksheet and become aware of what the weeds are that are blocking you off from the sunlight of the Spirit and blocking you off from accessing the development of your assets and your God-given gifts to become the greatest version of yourselves. And I have a feeling that those of you that are willing to take action, willing to do this, will have a better understanding of empathy of what your loved one is asked to do to recover from substance use disorder, because this is the very actions that we ask them to do in recovery. And so if you aren't willing to do it, you can get a feel for how it might be for them, that they may not be willing to do it. And we're not just asking them to do this in early sobriety. We're asking them to show up at meetings and to get vulnerable. We're asking them to do service. We're asking them to attend treatment groups. We're asking them to get in action. And I remember my parents said, to themselves, God, if we expect Jason to do all these things and we're not willing to do them ourselves, what kind of message does that send? And so they just experimented with it, and they found great peace and comfort and value by doing it. So super cool stuff right here. Again, this is a practice. This is definitely not a sprint. This is like yoga. This is like meditation. And this is so awesome to see how these tools are working, not just in my addicted loved ones' lives, but how I'm seeing it work in some of your addicted loved ones' lives. And I'm going to tell you this. This is a really big, bold statement, but it's true. If there is one tool that has not just protected me and saved my butt, but one that has brought the abundance and prosperity in my life, this tool, it's this one. It's this one. And I've had a lot of friends that I got sober with and that helped me get sober. And some of them used to tease me for doing this, the daily inventory. And when they would get tangled up, I would suggest that they do it. And sometimes they would laugh and just kind of dismiss it. And most of those guys didn't remain sober. But some of them are now sober, and some of them have learned that this process, it's not just the journaling or the inventory process, it's the overarching understanding that this is how the 12 steps work, is to take inventory of the stock in trade, just like a business, and then you pluck out and remove all of, if you have a fruit stand, you remove all of the rotten peaches and remove all of the rotten apples and all of the rotten bananas, because they will spoil the rest of the good fruit. And we have to do that on a daily basis in our own souls. And what I promise you is that your emotional sobriety will increase. Not only that, but this is the process right here, is that I show you the path, including the action steps. And as you go through this, I promise you, your self-efficacy is going to increase. I promise you. Sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly. And I'm not going to be the one to give you a guarantee on timelines, because everybody's dealing with separate situations. But, you know, the desired outcome, make it reasonable right here. Focus on only those initial actions first, and then resume this process throughout the journey. You know, down here, I'm just gonna, excuse me, I have a little bit of a cold. I'd like someone to read just this last section to tie up this, I guess, this overarching topic that we've been diving into for the last few weeks. May I ask, Shauna, are you in a place to read? If not, that's okay. Okay.
Hi there.
Hi.
It's although this chapter may seem a bit overwhelming and clinical, let me give you some hope. When my parents started attending regular Al-Anon meetings, family therapy groups, and reading bibliography, recovery self-help books, they naturally adopted this new approach of rapport and empathy, one day at a time. They didn't memorize techniques and study motivational interviewing skills. Their change happened organically as a result of their own recovery work and sincere desire to support me the right way. Dive into your own recovery from overhelping or overworrying about your addicted loved one. There are many, thank you. There are many other resources, such as self-help groups like Al-Anon, and books to help you experience rapid changes that will naturally lead you to better helping your loved one in their own recovery. For a list of other resources, see www.brickhouserecovery.com/unhooked.
Thank you. And then you'll notice in the book that the action stage is super short, and so is the maintenance stage. You may ask, why are those so short in the book? Well, most people that are reading this book, their loved one, they're not in this stage. They might be, but there's probably a second book, a sequel to Unhooked, that will be all about like the first year of sobriety and how do you navigate someone in their first year of sobriety. So I got a lot of ideas. I just need to free up some time to do this stuff. But you know, as I mentioned here, right here is the takeaway, is that this is one day at a time. This is a natural adoption of this approach. My parents didn't memorize these techniques and they didn't study, although I recommend those workshops for sure. I recommend study, but it's not like you're trying to pass a course. Their change happened organically as a result of their own recovery work and sincere desire to support me the right way. So, excuse me, I invite all of you to dive in to your own recovery work and just experiment with this. Some of you already are, and some of you may need a little extra motivation and or just the path of what to do. So begin that process of the inventory, because where we're eventually going to go is we're going to get into the steps to surrender. And those steps to surrender are going to be super powerful because I use them on a regular basis. Definitely not a one-time event. It's an ongoing event. How do you surrender? And part of that process is learning how to surrender your character defects. And so this is kind of like the intro to how the steps to surrender are going to actually work in your life. So I am out of time. I have an appointment right now at noon. So I'm going to cut it off now, and sure appreciate you guys. I know that there's some, excuse me, some questions in the chat, and would be happy to answer any of those if you want to shoot me an email or hit me up on Facebook Messenger. Too. So much love, you guys. Thank you for joining, and we will see you next week.
Thanks, Jason.
Thanks, Jason.